Tonight we're discussing machine learning and artificial intelligence, and the way in which they are already shaping the world around us, as well as discussing how they might transform our future. Artificial intelligence, that's a term that we are all probably aware of, usually, I think, via science fiction. So we tend to think of things like HAL in 2001, or Deckard in Blade Runner, Skynet, Terminator, which certainly gives us, probably in popular culture at least, a rather bleak outlook about the future of artificial intelligence. So tonight is really about the scientific reality. Now, a lot of the current advances in AI have been made possible in a scientific field called machine learning, which is one of the key things we're going to discuss tonight. It's grown rapidly in recent years, and there are many applications. You're probably familiar with them, although you might not know it. So Google Search, for example, uses machine learning. Spam filtering on email, Netflix film recommendations, Facebook feeds, all those use this technology, although perhaps we don't know it when we use it. And this is why the Royal Society has carried out a major policy project on machine learning. It's been investigating the potential of this technology in the near future and the barriers to safely realizing that potential. Now, speaking to the public has been a big part of that. It's a big part of what the Royal Society does, which is why we've asked you to send in questions. And all the questions I'm going to ask tonight are going to be questions that you've sent in. And to answer them, I'm joined by a panel of some of the world's leading experts in computer science, statistics, robotics, and artificial intelligence ethics. We're also going to get a chance to see just one way in which machine learning is being used and will be implemented in our everyday lives in the not-too-distant future. So without further ado, let me invite our panel to the stage, I think. There we are. And I'm going to get the panel to introduce themselves and give a brief description of their areas of expertise, one by one. And we'll start.
Thanks,
Peter.
Brian. My name's Peter Donnelly. I'm based at the University of Oxford, where I lead a large research centre of about 400 scientists. We're trying to understand the genetic basis of diseases, why people who have one particular letter at one place in their DNA code are more likely to get heart disease, whereas a different letter at another place in the code might make someone more likely to get arthritis, say. And we're trying to use those insights to understand the diseases better. And once we understand the diseases better, to use that biological knowledge to develop new drug therapies and new treatments for the disease. I'm a little bit unusual in working in genetics in that my background actually is in mathematics and statistics, and in the early years of my research career, my research was statistically based. Statistics has never been a subject that I found it particularly easy to get people excited about. There's an aphorism in our field that statisticians are people who like working with numbers, but don't have the personality skills to become accountants. And it's never been easy or in a succinct way to explain what I do. Many years ago, my then girlfriend, later my wife, did a much better job. I was working in America. I was coming to visit her. She was based in the UK. She mentioned to some of her colleagues that I was visiting, and one of them said, well, what does your boyfriend do? And Sarah obviously thought a little bit about how I'd explained that I use mathematical models to understand evolution. So she paused for a while and then said to her colleague, he models things. Well, the colleague got rather interested at this point, and the woman said to Sarah, what does he model? Sarah thought a bit more and then said, genes. He models genes. As you might imagine, when I did arrive and the woman met me, she was rather disappointed. But for a moment, it was an interesting area. And in some sense, my work today and our research in Oxford is about modeling genes.
I'm going to ask a question where you can only answer by saying either yes, no, or it's complicated. All right? So let's start over here. Is some form of superintelligence possible? Jan? Yes, no, or it's complicated?
Yes.
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 Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Definitely.
No.
This was disappointing. We didn't find any disagreements. Let's try harder. Just because it's possible doesn't mean it's actually going to happen. So before I asked if superintelligence is possible at all, according to the laws of physics, now I'm asking, will it actually happen? Yes, no, or it's complicated?
A little bit complicated, but yes.
Yes, and if it doesn't, something terrible has happened to prevent it.
That's what I meant.
Yeah.
Yes. Probably.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
No.
Shucks, still haven't found any interesting disagreements. We need to try harder still. Okay. So you think it is going to happen, but would you actually like it to happen at some point? Yes, no, or it's complicated?
Complicated, leaning towards yes.
It's complicated.
Yes.
Yes. It's really complicated. Yes.
It's complicated.
Very complicated.
Like, depends on which kind.
All right. So it's getting a little bit more interested. When I think we had a really fascinating, when is it going to happen? Well, we had a really fascinating discussion already in this morning's panel about when we might get to human level AI. So that would sort of put a lower bound. In the interest of time, I think we don't need to rehash the question of when going beyond that might start. But let's ask a very related question to the one that just came up here. Namely the question of, well, if something starts to happen, if you get some sort of recursive self-improvement or some other process whereby intelligence in machines starts to take off very, very rapidly, there's always a time scale associated with this. And there, I hope we can finally find some real serious disagreements to argue about here. Some people have been envisioning this scenario where it goes boom, and things happen in days or hours or less, whereas others envision that it will happen, but it might take thousands of years or decades. So if you think of some sort of doubling time, some sort of rough time scale on which things get dramatically better, what time scale would you guess at, Jan?
Starting now or starting with human level?
No. So once we get to human level AI or whatever point beyond there or a little bit before there, where those of you where things actually start taking off, what is this sort of time scale? Any explosion, as a nerdy physicist, has some sort of time scale, right, on which it happens. Are we talking about seconds or years or millennia?
But I think if it reaches a threshold where it's as smart as the smartest, most inventive human, then, I mean, it really could be, a matter of days before it's smarter than the sum of humanity.
Games are kind of microcosm of the outside world. That's why games were invented. That's why humans find it fun to play. There's a rich history of computers tackling board games. It started with games like backgammon, drafts, and then finally there was Deep Blue in '97 that beat Kasparov at chess, which was obviously a huge watershed moment for game AI. Since then, the really big remaining sort of holy grail, if you like, has been Go. In chess, the number of possible moves is about 20 for the average position. In Go, it's about 200. Another way of viewing the complexity of Go is that the number of possible configurations of the board is more than the number of atoms in the universe. If you ask a great Go player why they played a particular move, sometimes they'll just tell you it felt right. So the one way you can think of it is that Go is a much more intuitive game, whereas chess is a much more logic-based game. AlphaGo is our program to actually try and crack Go. We played the European champion Fan Wei in a 5-game match. We have an estimate of how strong a program is, but of course you never know. When you play a human player, they do all sorts of very interesting creative things that your programs don't necessarily do. So there's always an unknown. AlphaGo won 5-0, which is the first time ever a program has beaten a professional player. The way I see where we are now is that we've beaten the European champion now, and the next step for us is to try and challenge the legendary player Lee Sedol, who you can think of as the Roger Federer of Go.
We always used to talk about, well, if we could eventually crack Go and have a program that could beat the world champion, then we must have invented some generic, general-purpose algorithm. So maybe we're on the cusp of all of that.
And we're very excited about it, but it is just one rung on the ladder towards solving artificial intelligence.